top North Korean diplomat firing back at Secretary of State Mike Pompeo over comments he made describing Pyongyang's behavior as, quote, rogue, and warns Washington that hopes to resume denuclearization talks are fading. Colonel Chris Gibson is a U.S. Army veteran and distinguished visiting professor of American foreign policy at Williams College. He is also a former New York congressman who served on the House Armed Services Committee and the author of Rally Point, 5 tasks to unite the country and revitalize the American dream. Great to have you with us, sir.
Thanks, Laura. Great to be back.
Okay, so let's start with this back and forth between Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and a senior North Korean diplomat who fired back at Pompeo after he called the North Koreans' behavior rogue, which has seemed to put a kink in the plans of a possible talk between the two nations.
Well, first of all, the Secretary of State is exactly right. Behavior is rogue. I'm not surprised by North Korea's behavior either. Look, they think that President Trump is vulnerable. He's already taken political credit for improving the relations between these two countries. And what North Korea believes is that if the relationship has a perception of deteriorating, that's going to hurt President Trump going into the re-election. So they're trying to use that moment or that possibility as leverage so that the United States will enter in an agreement with them that recognizes them as a nuclear power. So the tactic that they're matching with the strategy is to create bad stories for President Trump. They fire off some missiles. It looks embarrassing to President Trump. He said the relations are improving. What's going on there?
Right.
And then, pointing out the Secretary of State's words, and they're really just trying to show a divide between what President Trump is saying and what Secretary of State is saying. I don't think any of this will work, but I can understand what they're trying to do here.
And, I wanted to ask you, the North Korean first vice foreign minister, Chae Son-yi, pushed back further, saying the U.S. had better not put their patience to the test, calling them, quote, thoughtless if they don't want to have a, quote, bitter regret later. Sounds like a threat.
Well, indeed. I mean, this is exactly the tactic, right? They're trying to give or project an image that things aren't exactly as President Trump says. They're hoping to pressure him into this agreement. Towards that end, President Kim has also said that he's only given the United States until 31 December to reach this agreement. If they don't reach it by then, he's going to move in another direction, presumably more bellicose and aggressive. And so it's possible that this latest actions with the Secretary of State perhaps is a backup plan. Because if they get into the new year and Kim then has to follow through and say, you're all done, Trump, I'm done with you now, he could actually come and say, you know what, I was going to be done with you, but if you fire that Secretary of State, who's the proximate cause of this disagreement, then I'll come back to the table. They may be very well working on a backup plan in the event, which I think is likely, that President Trump is not going to fall for this pressure tactic.
Joe Biden pushing back after being accused of telling a false war story on the campaign trail. Biden recently described security concerns in traveling to war-torn Afghanistan when he was vice president to honor a Navy captain who refused to receive the Silver Star from him for his heroism. But the Washington Post reports Biden conflated details from several different events into one story. Biden is now defending himself. So we're back with Colonel Chris Gibson on that. So I wanted to ask you your thoughts on this story and how important these details really are moving forward.
Well, it's not good. I wouldn't say it's a disqualifier, but look, if it's just one mistake, right? I mean, everybody makes mistakes. I make mistakes. We all make them.
Sure.
But when there's a pattern of mistakes, I think it's a problem. Where I grew up in the infantry, we had a saying, and it was tighten your shot group. And, where that comes from is when an infantryman gets his rifle, among the first things you have to do is zero or calibrate your rifle to your own sight picture. And the way you do that is you fire 3 rounds at a bullseye. And then, the standard there is that those 3 rounds are all hit the target or hit the paper in the same place, the effects, right? The standard is all within a quarter. You got a bullseye, you got the 3 rounds. If you have a tight shot group, you can actually adjust your iron sights onto the bullseye. If you don't have a tight shot group, you can't even zero your weapon. You can't calibrate your weapon. Politically, if Biden is not able to calibrate his statements, if he's not able to calibrate his campaign, he really lessens his chances of winning and certainly calling into question his effectiveness if he wins.
We've got to leave it right there. We want to thank you so much for your perspective on both of those topics.